Welcome to my latest video on the finished carpentry work that I'm doing for this basement remodel. Now today I'm back into the media room and it's time to address this mess over here. A bunch of tangled up wires and electronic equipment that are sitting out because we're using the media room while I'm building, but we need a more permanent solution to this. It seemed natural to fit a cabinet back here in this corner, out of the way where people aren't looking at it, to put in all of our equipment, so that's why I put all of the hookups into the wall here. I'm going to build a big cabinet that goes right here, but in addition to that, there's going to be a series of cabinets here underneath the windows to give us a place to put cushions and blankets and things like that. My wife and I just finished drawing up exactly what I want to build today. And I think it's time to get busy and turn this into a reality. So these cabinets are actually not going to be built in a typical way when you're considering the materials. The typical way to build a cabinet, even if you wanted a cherry look, would be to buy a 3/4 inch thickness plywood with a cherry veneer on both sides and do most of the work out of that. Well, it turns out that I can actually get cherry a bit cheaper than the plywood even in its solid form. I just have to work it down to the dimensions that I need and do some glue ups if it's a little too wide. You wouldn't do that because it's so much work if you were doing a whole house full of cabinets. You just get the plywood and work from there. But in this case, it's not that big a job. So I don't mind going through the extra steps of milling down this wood, gluing it up, and getting everything nice. I think that means it's going to have a real consistent look with all of the rest of the cherry work that's inside of that room. So I'm going to get started with not just this wood, I've got a whole pile of it behind you. And we're going to start milling that down and getting it into the required pieces. I want to show you the design process that goes into creating a cabinet like this before we get to actually cutting the material. What you're looking at here is how I do design, basically drawing out what I think the cabinets are going to look like and putting some dimensions on them. This is how my wife thinks about the design. I watched her walk around in circles, pretend to open and close doors, sit down, stand up, look at things from different angles. From all of that, I came up with this list. Given these new requirements, I went back and changed some of the dimension numbers, but basically the design stayed the same. Then out of that, I created a cut list for all of the parts that would go into making the cabinet. It's that cut list that I'm now going to be shaping all of this rough wood into. And thus begins the dance. It's a dance familiar to every woodworker. You take a rough piece of wood, you cut it down to the lengths that you need. Then you sashay over to your jointer, and you flatten out one long side and one edge. From there, you make a pirouette over to your table saw, and then cut the parallel edge. To delight the audience, I add a little step in the middle and glue some of the pieces together. With the interlude complete, you spin back over to your planer, where you get the thickness of your boards right to where you want them. Capping off the dance, you take it back to the beginning and you square up the edges using your miter saw. Now I hope you'll forgive me for overdoing the metaphor here, but no two dances are quite the same, and I had to do a little two-step around a long board that I couldn't quite straighten out the edge on the jointer. Because the jointer wasn't working, I needed to attach it to a different cutting surface that was straight and long. Once that was done, I could use that flat edge against the fence of my table saw and duplicate the jointer's job on that saw. That's a trick to keep around in your back pocket in case you ever need it. With the pieces all dimensioned, we can get to the cabinet specific work. Now I prefer to put a rabbet cut at the top and bottom of all the sides of the cabinets. Similarly, I add dado cuts for the shelves that are fixed. I believe it's both easier to assemble the cabinets with this technique and it makes them a bit stronger. There is one downside though if you mess up. So one of the things I really enjoy about making these videos is that I can show how to fix the little problems that come up, whether those problems are natural or they're made by mistakes. The first one's more of a natural one. I've got a little bit of a gap where I have this glue up line here, and I need to fix that before I put my finish on. Well, that's pretty easy, and I've shown that in other videos. You just take a little bit of glue in there, rub it in, take some sawdust from what you sanded, sprinkle that on top, sand it back out again, and you're good to go. It looks like it's just joined up perfectly. This is the bigger deal. If you can see here, I've dadoed in these slots where the shelves go. This is the side of the upper part of my cabinet, and the shelves are supposed to sit inside here. Well, the problem is the shelf is actually supposed to be 12 inches apart. What ended up happening is when I was cutting the dados, I cut with the reference side being the wrong side for this particular slot. It's not supposed to be here at all. I mean, one way to fix this is to go find a strip of cherry and stick it in there, glue it, and just hope no one really notices it's on the inside of a cabinet after all. But that's not really the right way to do it, and it'd be kind of hard anyways because most of those cutouts are going to have the grain facing the wrong way. The way I'm actually going to fix it is I'm actually now going to cut out all of this at a 1/4 inch depth. So it's all going away. And then I'm going to take the 1/4 inch material that I have that's going to go into the doors and the backing of the cabinet. And I'm going to stick that in there with the grain oriented in the right direction. The two will be separated by shelves, so you won't be able to tell that the grain doesn't quite match up. I'll show you how I'm going to do that here in the video. And I think if I hadn't told you, no one would have ever noticed. Sped up many times, the fix looks like this. First I dado out all of the material between the two shelves, then I sand it down flat. A liberal amount of glue is applied and spread out on the piece that goes between the two shelves. Then I use one of the boards I've already milled down to size to act as a guide, position my glue up right into place. Problem averted. Whether you're staining wood like I'm doing here, painting it, or just leaving a natural tone, I very much recommend on any cabinetry application that you put on a clear coat. In this case, I'm using polyurethane water-based semi-gloss coat. 2 coats on every surface, except for this, which is the countertop. I'm actually going to do 3. And between each coat, I take a 500 grit and lightly sand it. You can do it with the machine or by hand. If you're doing it with the machine, just make sure you're doing it light. And on any case where you've got a little bit of a detail, like the round over corner here, just do that by hand, or you might take off the finish with the machine. Well, here's a fun little blast from the past. If you saw me make the desk that's in my office, the Mountain Man desk, you saw me make these little guys. This is for little holes that can go into the top of the desk, allow cords, power cords and electronic cords to go through there, and then you cover it back up again. Well, I need the same thing for an entertainment center. We need to get those same cords up to the shelves above and inside of the cabinet. So I need these guys, except I can't use these because they're made out of walnut and mine is made out of cherry. So let's make some more of them. Now some people might consider this cheating, but I use a laser cutter to cut out these shapes. I then glue a bottom ring to the top ring. Then I take them over to the router table and give them a little 45-degree chamfer around the edges. Proper way to drill the hole in the shelf is with a Forstner bit, but I didn't have any of the right size, so I resorted to a hole saw. My drill press wasn't super impressed with the idea. The pressure caused the chuck to jump off the arbor, so I switched to manual mode and let my arm handle the torque instead. It does take a while to get all these pieces all cut out and ready to go, but it does lead to the fun part. Now we can assemble the cabinets. Since I'm dealing with hardwood and not plywood, I'm going to be countersinking all of my holes. The bottom of the base cabinet gets a full piece, whereas the top only needs a couple little strips. The rabbets and dados make it so that these pieces fit in perfectly where they're supposed to. Once the sides are all put together, the back of it will hold it square, and you just staple that into place. And that's how you make a cabinet. Here's one more little exception that comes up because I'm making these cabinets out of solid wood. In normal cabinet making, you would use plywood to make up the sides of the base. Then if there was an exposed end of one of the cabinets, you'd put a 1/4 inch veneer over it, so you don't see the plywood ever. Because I'm using solid wood though, I just want that solid wood to show on the outside. That means that I can't have those countersunk screws because that would make it look bad. So instead, in those areas, I'm making sure I glue it up first, then I use little brad nails to hold it in place while the glue sets. I'll come back later and fill in those brad nail holes. To place the cabinet, I first create a little base out of 4-inch plywood, shimming it up to make sure it's level everywhere. For this cabinet, I need to make a little cutout for the electrical outlet that's in the wall. Then if everything's been measured right, you can just drop that cabinet right into place. The cabinet and the base are level, but the wall is not entirely plumb. When this happens, you can use shims against the back of the cabinet between the cabinet and the wall. Then make sure you connect it into some studs in the wall. When that's done, double check the level, and in this case it came out perfect. You can cut the top of the shims off using either a razor blade or, in my case, an oscillating saw. The process continues for all of the cabinets that are connected together, so long as you've been very careful making sure that base is perfectly level. You shouldn't have any problem using cabinet screws to connect all of the bases together in a line. Now, not all cabinet makers make frames the way that I do. I wait until after the cabinets are placed. This allows me to come up with frames that span multiple cabinets, and I think it just looks a little better. The construction of the frame is fairly simple. I just pocket screw the entire frame together. Then on any non-visible surface, I also pocket screw the frames into the cabinet. In the areas where the pocket screws cannot be shown, I just use a brad nailer to hold it in place. The top of the cabinet can't be put on until the frames are there, because otherwise you couldn't get to the pocket screws. Those tops are attached using simple cabinet screws going up through the top of the cabinet. The top portion of the entertainment center then rests on the top of the base cabinet, and I screw that into studs also using my stud finder. That whole process plays out again and the three cabinets connected together, and here you can see why a frame that is designed after the cabinets are installed makes the whole thing look like one big unit. The cabinets are all in place now, and minus a little dusting, I think they look pretty good. 2 audibles, though, have been called to change the plan. One from me, one from my wife. For me, I don't like this piece up here. It's only a little over 3/4 of an inch tall, and these are 1.25 inches, and it just looks insubstantial compared to these other flat surfaces. So I'd like to take it out. The other problem I have is that I did not account for the 3/4 inch frame on the front, so it has a 3/4 inch gap in the back, and it means I'd have to remake it anyways. So that's mine. My wife says she actually likes it like this without the doors. So even though I've started making the doors, that plan has now gone out, and instead what she'd like is a little middle shelf in each one of the bays. We can just stack the blankets on top of those. So out go the doors, in come the shelves, and the top here. It's time to do some more cutting and gluing up. So I guess we start the dance again. But don't worry, this time I'll make it super quick. I already got to show you how I handle fixed shelves, so now I'll show you how I handle floating ones. It's best not to use a tape measure here, just take a jig and a block to make sure you get the same height every time, and drill your peg holes. I'm not a big fan of the L-shaped pegs, so I just use the straight ones. And my guess is that you actually don't need any help knowing how to put shelves onto a peg, but it is satisfying to see it come to its final form. The old and busted top comes down, and the new hotness top goes right up there. And I love how thick this one is. Then for the final touch, in go those little rings for the cords. When you finish with a job like this, you can sit back and just take the whole thing in. And there she is, an entertainment center made of solid cherry throughout. I hope you enjoyed watching the process of putting this entire thing together and maybe learned a couple techniques along the way. I also hope you've been able to see some of the other videos of the finished carpentry that I'm doing for this basement remodel. I'm on episode 3 now, and there's quite a few more to go. I hope you'll join me for the future ones. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see the notifications for those coming up. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. Hope to see you on the next one.